Welcome everybody to another live Q&A. I'm Brandon Rust, owner of Bokashi Earthworks. It is Saturday morning. Remember many Saturdays ago I would be watching cartoons at this time. Maybe a little X-Men or a little Amazing Spider-Man. A little further back, maybe a little bit of Ninja Turtles and He-Man, some Thundercats. Today, we're going to be talking about gardening. Cheers. To all my fellow wake and bakers. So what should we talk about today? I was thinking about talking about this Microbe Plus, which is on sale. And specifically a little bit about the synergy between the actual microorganisms. So Microbe Plus, very similar to EM, effective microorganisms. This product just has a higher colony forming unit, so it's a little more efficient. But it contains, this consortium contains lactic acid bacteria, so bacteria that produce things like lactic acid, citrate, and some other organic acids. It's got a purple non-sulfur bacteria, which is a photosynthetic bacteria. And those produce things like amino acids. It produces sugars. It produces a wide variety of compounds through photosynthesis, which end up as metabolites that can feed the other microbes. For a good example of this is the lactic acid bacteria can feed on amino acids that are being produced by the photosynthetic microorganisms. And so they work synergistically together in a lot of those respects. When we're talking about the sugars that are being produced, the yeast can also use those sugars. They can ferment those and turn them into other types of metabolites. So I actually, they have like this kind of cross-feeding thing where the bacteria digest plant matter into oleosaccharides, which are basically complex sugars that contain nutrients, which the fungi further mineralize. So they're a probiotic, and so they promote other microorganisms around them. They also produce quorum sensing molecules that help coordinate like community responses. And then these species also help with redox balancing. So flocculative anaerobes interact to stabilize rhizosphere oxidation, improving nutrient uptake. So that's one of the benefits as well. But overall, the Microbe Plus is used for nutrient mobilization. So the organic acid production that lowers pH and essentially enhances the solubility of bound nutrients like, iron and manganese, phosphorus, calcium, enzymes like phytase, cellulase, amylase. They all break down organic matter into bioavailable nutrients. You also get plant growth promotion through the production of things like indole-3 acetic acid, IAA, which is an auxin, by both bacteria and fungi. They produce vitamins, peptides. Peptides are always associated with nitrogen, with a nitrogen molecule, and also signaling molecules that improve germination of seeds, and it also improves stress tolerance and pathogen suppression. So competitive exclusion and anaerobic production inhibit things like Pythium, Fusarium, Botrytis, Septoria. You also get the benefit of biofilm formation, which biofilms help both aggregate soil particles and aggregate soil together to create better soil structure, which increases water and gas exchange. But also, those biofilms protect nitrogen fixing bacteria from oxidizing their nitrogenase, which is the chemical that converts atmospheric nitrogen and converts it into a bioavailable form. And then, carbon sequestration also. So increased microbial biomass will create stable humic substances and contribute to long-term carbon storage. So there's a lot of different like synergies that are happening when you're using like microbial inputs like that. So a little bit about it. How often do you feed humates? It depends on which type of system you're running, but like for me, I run a living soil modified growing mix, and I use them as an additive. So I'll do usually once in veg, once at transition with the complex, and then once in flower with the potassium humate. If you're in like an inert substrate, you might be feeding a few milliliters per day, like every day, or you might be doing. It just depends on this, because the thing is, if you already have nutrients in the media, adding it is going to bring in nutrients, but it's also going to create more bioavailability with what's already there. So in like a living soil system, using it more like an additive, even though it's a complete fertilizer, it's very efficient. So you don't have to do it very often. If you're using an inert, or hydro, you're usually blending it where you're doing a couple milliliters per gallon of water, maybe like 4 or 5 milliliters per gallon of water, and adding in your base A and B, but you're decreasing your base salts. There's just different ways that you can approach it. It just depends on your system. How long before the trichoderma is back in stock? It should be about a week. Shouldn't, maybe a little sooner, hopefully. It'll be back in stock soon. I was watching a video on a TikTok earlier, and the guy was saying that calcium keeps soil from packing hard after a rain during the summer months. What's your take on that? Well, it's not necessarily true, because you can have calcareous soils that have really high amounts of calcium, but they could still be compact. What really helps with water infiltration and water absorption is the amount of organic matter. So when you get large quantities of organic matter that are converted into humus, which is, long-term carbon storage, and it basically improves soil structure. And the way that it does that is when you're improving that soil structure, and when you have that organic matter, microbes can proliferate and live on that. They can create biofilms on that. They can create areas in which nutrients interact with those organic molecules that are being produced in those biofilms. So there's a ton of different things that are going on, but essentially carbon is the key, right? Carbon is what facilitates microbial processes. It facilitates, water and gas exchange because of how carbon works from a chemical standpoint on all the things around it. It's a building block of all living things. So anything that is organic is basically carbon based. and it acts as fuel, acts as a substrate for housing biology. So, while calcium can open up some soil types, like it can help open it up, the real thing that's going to contribute to long term and not having to keep on adding is, and you'll have longer retention of and solubility of those nutrients like calcium, is building up the carbon in the soil, because essentially you'll build up that biology, which will do all of the biochemical work. All the it's like, the way I like to think about microbes is kind of similar to the way that I think about cannabis, right? So they produce a bunch of secondary metabolites, and depending on what you like personally, you'll choose something that has X, Y, and Z cannabinoids, or X, Y, and Z terpenes, or X, Y, and Z flavonoids, and your nose usually knows, what you like. And it's because that plant is producing these secondary metabolites that are essentially having that biochemical effect on your own internal and endocannabinoid system. The way that microbes work is they're producing a wide variety, and depending on the microbial species, their metabolite will also vary. And so when you get groups of microorganisms that are creating metabolites that they can either feed off of, or that does some type of biochemical thing on the soil system, whether it's chelate a nutrient and keeps it available, whether it's a phytohormone that stimulates a plant response, whether it's an antimicrobial property that suppresses pathogens. All of these are essentially derivatives or secondary metabolites that the microorganisms are produced. So all the biochemical work, all the chemistry is happening because of these metabolites. This is a really good question. What are the benefits of adding granular humic versus liquid humic? Is fulvic better than humic acid, or just add both? So fulvic, it depends on what you're trying to do. So humic acid, if it is something like that's just derived from leonardite and it's not extracted, because what you'll see oftentimes is they'll take the raw material, that's this right here, this is lignite. Sometimes it's referred to as leonardite, but it is basically surface coal. And what happens is, what they'll do oftentimes is they'll just crush this up and they'll put it in a bag, and they'll be like, oh, it's got humic and fulvic acid in it. But the thing is, they're not in a bioavailable form. What happens is they are essentially trapped, those humic and fulvic acids, any of the nutrients that are in this are trapped in this mineral matrix. And so it'll take a long time for it to really have an immediate effect. Now, fulvic acids, when you take this and then you micronize it down to a certain level, and then you extract the humic and fulvic acid, which is usually what you get with a liquid, then what you're doing is you're dropping out during that process all of the humane, which is basically all the larger organic molecules that don't have any solubility. So, I mean, they're fine for like a soil conditioner, but they're not going to have any type of biochemical relationships really in the soil. They'll just kind of be inert in the soil. When you extract the humic and fulvic acid, the humic acid is a larger molecule, so it increases the soil exchange capacity, the cation exchange capacity. So that can help with long-term storage and liberation of nutrients. It also can help with the housing of microbiology. But the fulvic acid is a smaller molecule. It has a solubility across all pH ranges. So when it chelates, and what it does is it grabs onto nutrient ions, it chelates them, and it keeps them soluble at any pH range. So it's not, the uptake isn't dependent on pH. They also act as microbial fuel, so they can be catabolized for energy. So they act as more of a biostimulant. While they're used for immediate energy, the humic and fulvic acid will actually help with soil structure, which will help with housing biology. So they're a little bit different. So usually if you're just getting a granular, it's usually just crushed up material. Usually when it's a liquid, it's because it's actually been extracted and they separate out the humic and fulvic acid fractions first using, a catalyst. Sometimes it could be phosphoric acid, sometimes it could be citrate, sometimes it'd be potassium hydroxide. It just depends on, the manufacturer. Would the Bacillus subtilis and Trichoderma be beneficial in my garden veggies? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I use them because, dude, it has been dumping out here in Oklahoma for the last almost 2 months. Since spring started, it has been wet. It has been so goddamn wet out here. I mean, it was storming last night too. And so it's like those are the types of situations where I feel like my soil might be too saturated, where I'll make sure that I've done that type of maintenance. So this year I've applied a few times, and I applied it on my tomatoes, on my onions, on my potatoes, my beans, peas, like my whole veggie garden, also squash. So what happens in this, I don't usually see powdery mildew until the very end of the season. And it usually starts happening when the temperatures drop a little bit and starts getting cooler and it's still kind of humid. And so spraying things like melons, squash, cucumbers that all get PM will help combat that. And if you do it preventively, you may not even see it at all. And then obviously I use it on my weed too. Another thing, tomatoes. So if you ever get bottom end rot on your tomatoes where the bottom of the tomato starts getting squishy and it kind of looks like a mold is growing on there, there's a couple things you can do. Add more calcium. I got the calcium silica, this stuff right here. You can add that. And also that Trichoderma Bacillus subtilis combination can help fight that fungus too. Here's a question. I just applied the second dose of Microbe Plus to your bed. What's my opinion on potassium sulfate and application rates for reamending 120 gallons of soil? So usually when I do my reamending, I base it off of a test. But I think that a safe rate to apply, as long as if you know that you're deficient in potassium, like you for sure know, and I think a safe application rate would be half of a cup per yard of soil, and you won't overdo it. You might not be bringing in enough, but you won't overdo it. You can also use another really good amendment that I actually like, that I use myself, although I do not sell it, is sunflower hull ash. So it doesn't have as much potassium. It's only about maybe 55% the amount. I think it's 0.0022, while potassium sulfate I think is like 0.0040 maybe. But I do like that sunflower hull ash because it doesn't bring any of the sulfur in from the sulfate in, which if you bring too much sulfate in, I mean, it's obviously good for like oil producing crops and stuff like that. But if you bring too much and you're doing things like drybacks, it can really cause a lot of osmotic stress in your system. And so I really like using the sunflower hull ash because it doesn't contain nearly as much sulfur, and it has a bunch of calcium in it. And it's like, you can never really get too much calcium. I mean, you can start antagonizing stuff, but like the plant just loves calcium. Plants just love calcium. That's right. Yeah. If you're completely deficient, a half a cup to a cup per yard, you would be fine. but I wouldn't go any higher than that without getting a test. And you, like I said, you have to really know that you're deficient, because, sometimes a potassium deficiency or calcium or magnesium deficiency could be caused by too much sodium, or one of each of those other nutrients, and it can express itself as a deficiency in those other nutrients, because they compete for space in solution when they're disassociating from soil colloids, or when they're falling into solution from organic matter or whatever it is. If there's too much of one, it creates an imbalance. So is Micro Plus strictly a soil inoculant, or is it beneficial as a foliar spray as well? Yeah, you can spray it. It's actually not even just for soil. So you could use Micro Plus in like aquaculture. If you were, growing tilapia or shrimp farming, you can use it at, to inoculate feedstock for, cattle and chickens. You can use it to do bioremediation on, contaminated water. There's a lot of purposes. And yes, you can spray it. You can use it not just in soil, but you can use it in cocoa. You can use it, in hydro systems as well. It's definitely beneficial. It have benefits. I don't spray it on, because I'm mostly using Trichoderma and Bacillus as my like main inoculant for my plant phylosphere. But I also like to spray Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate, if I can, a couple weeks. Sometimes I slack on it, but it's a really good practice and increase plant vigor and health. It's a great way to get magnesium into your plant without antagonizing any nutrient interactions in the soil. You haven't seen rain in months? Oh man, it's coming down out here. I'm gonna have to file an insurance claim because it's eroding a lot of my backyard right now. Yeah, it's here's the thing. So if it stays this wet all throughout summer, it's gonna feel like a tropic jungle where it's just super, super hot and humid. I definitely didn't I expected it to be a wet season because I read it in the Farmer's Almanac, but this is the wettest season that I've ever seen out here in Oklahoma. Yeah, they do. So the Micro Plus has labs in it, lactic acid bacteria, but it also has the photosynthetic bacteria and the fermentive yeast. And so that those organisms that the labs that you make, they're essentially just adding, you know, more microbes to the consortium. They'll all play well together. Just reading some of these comments. Yep, that's what I did too. In the SIP containers. So when I'm running auto pots, or I'm bottom feeding, and we have a reservoir that's basically just, it's filled with water and is, it just feeds the plants and the plant just takes them up bottom feed. I add the Micro Plus because that'll help suppress any pathogens, and it'll help, cycle nutrients. It keeps the water pH kind of lower, and as long as your media is buffered, and you've got everything going, man. It rocks it. The farmers around here should have a bumper crop with all the rain. Yeah, it's definitely possible. Definitely possible later in the season. So, yep, I'm working on another. I did a live the other day on the benefits of coconut water. So if you guys haven't gotten to see that, it's posted up on the YouTube. Oh man, let's see. I need a poker up here. Well, I'll use this old pen. Yeah, trichoderma will be back in stock in about a week, and what ended up happening with that is I did a sale, and like I didn't expect so many people to purchase it, and so I ran out of stock. But it'll be back soon, about a week. Let's see here. Here we go. Yeah, that is, my biggest concern right now with all the amount of rain is pathogens, because when you get into a situation where there's too much water or, your soil is anaerobic, if you don't have the right type of biology in that soil, that's the right type of place for pathogens to grow. And things like fusarium, when it gets real wet, get bad. Bud mold can be really bad, especially later on in the season when things start fruiting and flowering. Yeah, the magnesium sulfate, aka Epsom salt, that's just like a little hack. You can use that, pretty much 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. You can spray it on anything, house plants, uh, your weed, your tomatoes. Yeah, the Micro Plus is on sale for, I don't know, I think another 8 days. I extended it because a bunch of people reached out. So I was gonna, like I said, the trichoderma sale only lasted like 3 days. Uh, so once I restock, I'll put it back on sale. You guys can get some of that for the season. My plants are starting to go now. Other than this fucking rain, man. When it is sunny, we're getting a really good VPD for veg in my area. So, when it's sunny and warm, it's been around 80 to 84 degrees. And since it's been so wet out, the humidity has also been pretty high. So the humidity is probably sitting around like 70, at least 70%. And the plants are just loving it this year. But we'll see what happens, man. We keep getting all these damn tornado warnings out here. I keep getting these flash flood warnings, which my fucking backyard, dude, has got a new stream running through it. It's fucking crazy. It's like, it's gonna be. And apparently, even FEMA declared like a national disaster or something in the, like close to the area. So it's been kind of wild out here. Okie grow, you got a volunteer in your backyard that's already 5 foot tall. That's cool. I've got some, I put mine out a lot later. Um, but I've got some, I have a clone, that Bicket OG, that's getting pretty big. And then all the moms that I had put out for the season, they're all doing their thing too. We'll see. We'll see what the rest of the season holds, though, really, because it's cool. Rain's fine. I mean, the only frustration right now with the rain is like I wanted to lay down some liquid, some Microbe Plus. I wanted to lay down some Humate, and I have literally had no chance to where I feel comfortable enough with the soil being dry enough for me to water. So I just have to wait until I get a lapse and things dry down a bit before I can go in there and water everything. So you're getting worried about one of your plants in your hoop house. Yeah, they can get big, dude. Especially if you start vegging something, or if you pop seeds indoors and you got them in some bigger pots or something, and you let them veg out for a couple of months before you acclimate them to outside, dude, you can get some fucking crazy big plants, dude. Shit. Yeah. Last year, I had plants that were fucking 16 foot tall, and I didn't even mean for that to happen, and they weren't even in pots. I just planted seedlings. No, I planted seedlings all last year. Peach daiquiri, a bunch of bubble kush crosses, a bunch of blueberry train mac stuff, and I left for like 3 weeks in, I think, July, and I was out in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and I came back, dude, and my plants were too big for me to like trellis or do anything with. They just fucking got crazy big. Did I get my water line covered back up? Nope, I haven't. No. So what happened is I have like a backyard that's fenced in, and then I have a gate to a paddock where the chicken coop is, where the horse pen is, and the water was so crazy, dude. It like created like a stream through my backyard, through that paddock, and yeah, it uncovered up just the lines. It didn't like mess anything up other than the soil. So I just have a big old trench running through my fucking backyard now, which I'll just have to take pictures and send it to my insurance company. All right, you guys have any more questions? If not, I'm gonna head out. I'll see y'all later.